Hi, I'm Dr. Francine MacInnis. I'm a clinical and organizational psychologist in Montreal, and I'm going to speak with you today about developing sustainable habits. And I think this is a really pertinent subject right now. I personally believe that habits are the backbone of our mental health, which is really on people's minds right now. The stress levels are tremendously high. Some of that is due to the emotional impact of social isolation, of anxieties related to health and jobs and finances, and even what the future holds. So tremendous emotional impact. And right next to that, less visible, less conscious, are the cognitive impacts. So normally we operate in our day-to-day and we lean upon our routines and our established habits to handle things outside the conscious mind. So when we're in a disrupted environment, all of that comes back into the conscious mind and has a cognitive impact. So fatigue and difficulty with concentration and attention and integration of new information is very, very difficult. So I think the timing is good, if we haven't already done so, to bring back or transform some of those formerly established and helpful habits, and maybe even add in some new ones to provide some support and offset the stresses that we're under. So that normally in our day-to-day we have a certain stress level. Now it's even higher. And our habits, our day-to-day habits, whether or not those are social or physical habits or the way we operate, the way we run our households, those are our natural rebalancers. Those are our natural regulators for our stress. And for the most part, many of those have fallen away or have been disrupted, or we've lost them altogether. So I think it's time to be thinking about how we can bring some of those back and add some new ones. Now, when we talk about forming new habits, a really quick response that I'll get is, I don't know if I can make any new habits because I lack the motivation. So people strongly associate habit formation with needing a lot of motivation up front. So one piece of good news is that motivation is not really the driver in habit formation. It's when you dig into the literature, what you find out is motivation is an outcome or an output of a developed habit loop. It's not the fuel for it. So that's good news, because I know motivation is in short supply right now. The other good news is that disrupted environments are actually good environments for forming new habits. So when we have our well-established habits, we fall into routine and automation, and so we often don't have the same openness to making new habits because we feel kind of well set up for the most part. So disrupted environments are also okay for new habits. So maybe a few words about the how, some tips around setting up a new habit. Now this first one, which is clarifying your intention, is going to sound suspiciously like motivation, finding your motivation. But it's really just clarifying that you're ready to go. So when people talk about starting a new habit, I often hear language like, I should really run more. I should really eat more fruits and vegetables, or I should get to bed by 10. And those are key words to understand that you're in a contemplative mode. You're still deciding if you're going to make that change. You're still unconvinced. And these are messages that you consider to be coming at you from the outside. And you need to first decide, do I get behind this? Do I want to do this? So habit loops can be formed once you've already decided personally that you're invested, that you want to do this. So the second half of clarifying the intention is, what is it specifically you intend to do? So it's a good time to define that more in more concrete terms, like I'd like to walk 10 minutes a day. I'd like to meditate a minute a day. I'd like to get myself to bed by 10 p.m. So clarifying the intention makes it more concrete and more actionable. So that's step one, clarify the intention. Step two is to get to get your mindset in order. So oftentimes when people set out to form a new habit, they get very goal-oriented, and we can be achievement and performance junkies. And when you're forming a new habit, this is not a performance zone. This is an experimental zone. So when you're forming especially a new habit, you're relearning, or you're learning for the first time, a set of skills. And Setting too many performance goals can actually break the habit right out of the gate, because we start feeling concerned that we're failing and not performing. So changing that mindset into an experimental mindset, a discovery, an exploration mindset, puts the right expectations around the front end. Because your main goal in forming a new habit is getting it started. Quality and methodologies and all that kind of thing are secondary or unimportant, as opposed to getting the wheel started. So mindset is really important. The third tip is to focus on frequency, repetition. So the more we repeat, the more the neural pathways are formed, the more we're developing some skills. And repetition is important to transfer from really active processing into automation. So the number of repetitions is the most important. Taking action is the most important. The quality is not important, not at the front end of the habit loop. So really take a bias for action and try to get as many reps as you can, even if that feels like low quality or low volume. It's not the focus at the front end. So frequency over quality, action over perfect planning. The fourth is to actively manage the friction of starting. So in habit development, friction of starting is a thing. So it's not about me or you or our motivation. That's that overcoming the initial inertia that naturally comes with unknown territory or some unfamiliar skills. So considering that it's going to be there, you want to plan for it. And here's a few ways that you can overcome the friction of starting. The first is to give yourself really clear cues. So if you wanted to start meditating, for example, you could say, as soon as my alarm goes off, I'm going to go and sit on the couch and I'm going to meditate for 1 minute. Alarm goes off, couch, meditate 1 minute. And having an app or having a plan for a rough plan for what's going to get you through that minute, very useful. Or each day at 7:30, I'm going to go to the door, put on my shoes, and walk around the block. So cue, action. And what you might see here is that this circumvents motivation. This circumvents thinking. What you don't want to do is get up and say, do I feel like going for a walk? Should I go for a walk today? What'll I do? Do I want 5 minutes? Because then that engages the mind in negotiation and consideration, and we don't want the mind involved because it's probably not going to be motivated. It's not going to be interested enough at this point, not this early in the chain. So cue, action. The next one is the next tip for overcoming that friction is to give yourself a micro action. So ask yourself the smallest thing you can ask to get the habit started. So even if you intend to walk 30 or 40 minutes eventually, 5 minutes is enough, because it is just enough to start the wheel, and you can build up to 6 minutes or 3 blocks or 4 blocks or 5 blocks after. But when it's really, really low, it's a lot more difficult to get into excuse making and saying I can't do it or I don't have time, etc., which are normal responses in a new habit development. So set up a micro action that's more difficult to not accomplish. Next is you can pair your target behavior or habit with something that's already established. So you can park it right in front of something you already like to do, because that thing you already like to do, you are motivated to do. So when you park it right in front, you know you can anticipate, you can crave the rewards of the next thing, even if the habit isn't what you crave, and it helps to get it done. So I'm going to go for my walk before coffee. So I really enjoy a slow, quiet coffee. I'm going to get my walk done first, and then I can enjoy. So you kind of pair things up from established habits. So those are a few tips for overcoming the friction of starting. Next after that is to track. So it's a natural reinforcer or encouragement to get to see progress, because it's a little mini form of accomplishment is to get it done. So you can track that on a board. Getting it for it to be visible really helps. So if you have a calendar and you can put big X's on the days that you got it done, that really helps. An additional aid when you're tracking is to shoot for some strings. So for whatever reason, humans find that particularly motivating is 3 in a row or 4 in a row. So again, the calendar where you can see that and you can reward, you give yourself a little reinforcement schedule for I got 1 done is a certain reward, getting 3 in a row done is a different reward. So you can have a little menu of rewards that, again, it's all about greasing the wheel up front. And what you've started to do is build in some motivation and excitement about it because it feels really good to make progress, to honor that intention. So tracking also helps. After that, once you've really started to get a few reps in, the next suggestion is to start to use a mindful approach. Start to notice the impact or the effects, the benefits of your new habit. So often we can be really dismissive or critical or demanding when we're in a new habit, but we want to change that for very mindful, very observant of benefits. So right after you've done the thing that you intended to, try and tap into how you feel. And that good feeling that might be there could be simply from, I said I was going to do it and I did it and that feels good. That's kind of step one or level one of good feeling. Another could be, I did what I intended and I feel calmer, or I feel more relaxed, or I feel more engaged, more energized by my intention. I feel more at peace for what I put into place, or I feel more rested than I did yesterday. And so it's that mindful attention to early signals of what's going well. And as you can see, as you get the reps up, those benefits, those outcomes of putting the habit in place are starting to cultivate the motivation. So the motivation is starting to show up at this point in the process. And we want to cultivate that motivation. We don't expect it up front. We cultivate it over time so that it's there for us to maintain or sustain the habit. The other part of that that's really motivating is that as we do something and see an effect, it reinforces self-efficacy. So one of the sources of motivation, and a long-term sustainable source of motivation is, and skill development, is self-efficacy. So when we make a plan, do it, and see an outcome, that builds that self-efficacy belief. We show it to ourselves. So really observe and savor. So when you observe already, you can see the effects, but savoring means just really drink it in, because when we really spend time noticing it and savoring it, we also register those successes, which has additional benefits for mood and motivation. And the last one I would put to you is to then think about it on a bigger level. So there's a few different levels to establish a habit. The first is outcome-based. I want to lose 3 pounds. I want to walk 5 kilometers. And some smaller goals, help, but they're outcome-based. And what can happen if you have a strictly outcome-based intention is that when you achieve it, you stop. And for sustainable habits, you want to start to anchor it in as an ongoing process. This is something, it's like fitness. If you stop exercising or you stop eating well, you stop being fit, you stop being healthy. So you want to minimally be thinking about an ongoing process. And then after that, you really want to shoot for the most integrated, sustainable habits. You want to think about it on an identity level. You want to see yourself as somebody who is fit. See yourself as someone who is a meditator or a swimmer or a dancer or whatever thing, somebody who is neat and tidy, somebody who is organized, because you're building up to expanding your sense of yourself as including these new habits as who you are. And so the final piece of that you can consider, because there's lots of good online forums and encouragers and ways to connect, even if it's not in person, is to join a community of people who practice what you're interested in having in your life. So joining a community of like-minded people, you have that in common, you have a source of encouragement, of inspiration, and it also reinforces that sense of identity that I am part of a community of people who demonstrate this habit. So those are my tips for establishing habits. We're going to have an online Facebook session, and I would love it if you would join us and share your experiences and your thoughts and questions. And I will put the references for this video today in the notes in case you want to consult some of these resources on your own. So I will look forward to seeing you then. Take care. Bye.